decadent creams and custards, perfectly flaky crusts, delectable chocolates and deep-fried doughs, perfect pies, gooey marshmallows, and ice cream baked in meringue, join me for today's delicious video as we explore the top 15 most tasty desserts. Number 15. Baked Alaska. Lavish and puzzling, Baked Alaska is one of the tastiest desserts on the planet. With caramelized meringue on the outside and ice cream on the inside, Baked Alaska is a feat of science. It begins by placing ice cream in a bowl. The ice cream is then covered with pieces of sponge cake. From there, the dessert is flipped upside down so the sponge cake becomes the bottom of the dessert. Lastly, the ice cream is slathered in meringue, and then the whole thing is put into a very hot oven. The dessert cooks long enough for the meringue to caramelize, but not long enough for the ice cream to fully melt. The sponge cake and the meringue don't conduct heat very well, so the ice cream stays frozen even in the oven. However, because it is ice cream, the dessert must be made quickly, otherwise the ice cream will melt. Number 14. Pavlova. A crisp crust, a soft, light inside, fruit and whipped cream topping. Pavlova is a delicious dessert that is a celebratory staple in both Australia and New Zealand. The dessert was actually named for the famous Russian ballerina Anna Pavlova and was created in the 1920s when the ballerina was on tour in Australia. Pavlova has similarities to meringue since it's made from beaten egg whites. However, Pavlova has a marshmallow-like consistency in the center, unlike meringue, which is commonly more solid. Pavlova is traditionally made with egg whites, castor sugar, lemon juice or vinegar, corn flour, and vanilla. The dessert is baked very slowly in an oven for about an hour, and it's usually left overnight to dry out. It's often topped with fruit like strawberries as well as whipped cream. Man, Pavlova is a popular dish in the summer and is often served during Christmas celebrations. Number 13. Creme brulee. Few desserts can rival the silky, creamy smoothness of creme brulee. Creme brulee dates back to the late 1600s when the earliest known recipe for this classic French dessert appeared in a cookbook by François Massielot. However, it's commonly believed that creme brulee was inspired by the very similar crema catalana, which dates back to the 14th century. But creme brulee really didn't make its mark until the 1980s when it started to appear in restaurants, namely Sirio Macchioni's New York restaurant Le Cirque. Creme brulee quickly became a symbol of decadence and a staple dessert at many high-end restaurants. It's also known as burned cream because the surface of the dessert consists of caramelized sugar. It's almost always served in ramekins. The dessert is made from egg yolk, sugar, and heavy cream. Diners often delight in cracking the top of the dessert with a spoon. Number 12. Pastel de nata. When it comes to tasty desserts in Portugal, pastel de nata reigns supreme. This popular Portuguese dessert is made from a puff pastry and a custard filling, but there are regional variations of this sweet, crispy, creamy dessert. This one dates back about 300 years to a monastery in Belém, and at the time the monks and nuns used egg whites to starch their clothes because laundry detergent was scarce. This gave them tons of leftover egg yolks, so instead of wasting them, they created a custard tart recipe. From there, they began selling their tarts until the monastery closed in 1834. The owners of Fábrica del Pastis bought the recipe, and while the original one is still a well-guarded secret, variations of pastel de nata can be found throughout Portugal. The custard filling is made from cream, egg yolk, sugar, flour, and lemon zest, and the puff pastry is baked to perfection, offering a crispy, light casing to the sweet custard filling. Number 11. Mochi. Chewy, colorful, and full of flavor, mochi is a tasty and popular Japanese dessert. The main ingredient of mochi is mechigome, which is a short-grain glutinous rice, but other ingredients like sugar, water, cornstarch, and food coloring are often added. Mochi is often filled with red bean paste. Traditionally, making mochi is a pretty labor-intensive ordeal. In fact, mochi is traditionally made during a ceremony called mochitsuki. The rice is first soaked overnight and then steamed. From there, it's pounded with wooden mallets called kine. This is done in a traditional mortar called an usu. The process requires two people, one to mash the mochi and the other to turn and wet the mochi. Once it's mashed up, it's formed into shapes, usually spheres. Modern mochi making, though, is a lot simpler. A flour of sweet rice called mochiko is mixed with water and then cooked either in a microwave or on the stovetop until it reaches a nice sticky texture. Mochi is popular throughout Japan and is a staple dessert of many national celebrations. Number 10. Sticky Toffee Pudding. Often called a British classic, sticky toffee pudding combines several mouth-watering ingredients to create a sticky, sweet, delicious dessert. The base for sticky toffee pudding is very moist sponge cake. This cake is slathered in a rich toffee sauce and usually served with vanilla ice cream or vanilla custard. But what makes sticky toffee pudding so unique is that the sponge cake has chopped dates in it. Dates have a naturally high sugar content, so they sweeten the sponge cake. And while sticky toffee pudding likely originated in England, although its origins are often argued and not really confirmed, sticky toffee pudding is also widely popular in Australia and New Zealand, where it's called sticky date pudding. It's best served warm. This sweet, sticky dessert is about as tasty as pudding can get. Number 9. Tiramisu. Tiramisu is a classic Italian dessert that roughly translates as pick-me-up, which makes sense since the dessert is drenched in coffee. Traditionally, tiramisu used lady fingers, which are a type of finger biscuit dipped in espresso. The fingers are layered with a mixture of sugar, eggs, and mascarpone cheese. It's usually flavored with cocoa as well. It's believed that tiramisu was created in the 1960s at an Italian restaurant called Le Becceria in Treviso. But this has been contested by other chefs, of course, in other regions. Modern tiramisu often mixes in whipped cream with the mascarpone cheese to make a lighter, foamier cream. And liqueur, which is amaretto, dark rum, brandy, or Irish cream, is sometimes added to this layered, tasty dessert. Tiramisu is commonly served in glasses so the layers can be seen. Number 8. Churros. What could be more delicious than a fried dough sprinkled in cinnamon sugar? Churros are a common dessert in Latin America, but they originated in Portugal and Spain. They were introduced to South America in the 1500s during the Spanish Inquisition. Churros often have a rigid surface because the dough is piped through a tool called a churrera. This dough is then fried until it's crunchy, and they're often sprinkled with sugar. They're also commonly sold by street vendors. In Spain, churros are often eaten as a breakfast, where they're dipped in hot chocolate or dulce de leche, which is a sauce-like confection made from sugar and milk. And although churros come from Spain and Portugal and have been a staple in Latin America for a very long time, they've made their way into mainstream food in the United States. Churros are even sold at Disneyland and Disney World, where tourists wolf down roughly 2.8 and 3.8 million churros respectively each year. Number 7. S'mores. A crispy graham wafer, a gooey toasted marshmallow, and a nice slab of rich melted milk chocolate. S'mores are an iconic American and Canadian dessert that are often enjoyed around a campfire, although they can easily be made at home too. S'mores consist of a toasted marshmallow and a piece of chocolate that's sandwiched between two pieces of graham cracker. The marshmallow is usually roasted on a fire, but it can be heated on a stove flame or in a microwave. Because the marshmallow is hot, it helps the chocolate to melt, so the result is a sweet, gooey center with an outer layer of crunch. Because of their popularity, s'mores have inspired many s'more-flavored treats and confections. S'more Pop-Tarts, s'more granola bars, and s'more ice cream are just a few. Number 6. Chocolate souffle. Few desserts can get a chef's and chocolate lover's heart racing quite as quickly as a chocolate souffle. For the chocolate lover, the racing heartbeat comes from knowing that they're about to bite into a decadent, rich chocolate-flavored dessert that boasts a light and airy outer texture. For chefs, though, the racing heartbeat comes from anxiety. Chocolate souffle is an extremely technical dessert. When done well, the dessert will rise in all of its souffle glory. But one wrong move and the souffle will sink, resulting in a failed dessert. Furthermore, even when souffle rises perfectly, it will inevitably sink, so the dessert has to be served immediately after cooking. But when all goes well, when the souffle rises like it should, when the souffle makes it to the table on time, a chocolate souffle is a luxurious dessert that often leaves people wanting more. Chocolate souffle has its roots in French cuisine. The main ingredient here are eggs and chocolate. Egg whites are whipped and then folded slowly into melted butter. Melted chocolate and egg yolks are then added. Number 5. Cheesecake. There are as many variations of cheesecake as there are fruits to put on top of it. From the classic New York cheesecake to chocolate peanut butter to pumpkin, cheesecake comes in so many different flavor profiles, it would be impossible to list them all here. But whether the cheesecake has been infused with chocolate bars like Toblerone, Turtles, or Snickers, or fruits like raspberries, strawberries, or mangoes, or even liqueurs like Bailey's, one thing remains the same. Cheesecake is a rich and decadent dessert that has its roots in a creamy, cheesy base. Today, cheesecake is most often associated with cream cheese, although mascarpone cheese or ricotta cheese are also sometimes used. The cheesecake originally dates back to the ancient Greeks. Greeks on the island of Samos pounded fresh cheese with flour and honey and then baked the mixture on a griddle. During the medieval ages, though, cheesecake changed to include a pastry base. Europeans loved the sweet dessert, and by the 1400s, cheesecake recipes were popping up in cookbooks all over the continent. Cheesecake then made its way over to the United States with the American colonists. At that time, cheesecake was made from curd cheese, but by the 19th century, cream cheese was used in lieu of curd cheese. And the thick and creamy cheesecake we know today was born. Number 4. Classic apple pie. Apple pie hails from England, although it's widely considered to be an unofficial symbol of the United States. With its tender baked apples seasoned in sugar and cinnamon and its flaky crust, apple pie is a tasty and iconic dessert. A classic American apple pie has crust on both the top and the bottom, and the top crust usually consists of cross-woven strips in a lattice pattern or have a solid top with air vents. The American apple pie is not the only apple pie out there. There are, of course, several variations of apple pie depending on what country the pie is being served in. English apple pie often uses saffron for coloring and features layers of sliced brle apples. Dutch apple pie comes in either a crumble or lattice variety and is often flavored with raisins, almond paste, and cream butter. French apple pie is served upside down with the crust on the bottom and caramelized apples on top. And Swedish apple pie boasts breadcrumbs and rolled oats in lieu of traditional pie pastry, making it more of a crumble pie than a crust-based pie. In any case, no matter how you slice it, apple pie is a delicious dessert that often makes people think of comfort. Number 3. Gelato. When it comes to tasty desserts, gelato is one of the most famous in the world. Gelato comes from Italy, but it's made its way across the continent and the ocean. Today, gelato can be found throughout Europe and in North America. It's got similarities to ice cream, but is known for being more flavorful. This is because gelato and ice cream have two very important differences. The first is that ice cream generally uses more cream than gelato. Gelato is heavier on the milk side. And since buttercream is known to coat your palate and gelato has less buttercream than ice cream, it's easier to taste the flavors in gelato than it is in ice cream. The second major difference is in the way that the two are churned. Ice cream is usually churned very quickly, and the quick churning allows air inside. On the other hand, gelato is churned much slower, so it has a much denser consistency. Because gelato has less fat and less air, it melts slower and can be served at warmer temperatures than ice cream. In fact, ice cream is best served at a temperature between 0 and 10 degrees Fahrenheit, while gelato is best served between 7 and 15 degrees. The warmer temperature also helps with gelato's flavor profile. Because gelato is warmer than ice cream, your tongue doesn't get as numb and can really absorb all the soft silkiness and rich flavors that gelato offers. This all comes with a higher cost, of course. Gelato is, on average, more expensive than ice cream, but given the superior flavor, I think it's worth the higher price. Number 2. Fondant cakes. They say you eat with your eyes, and if that's true, then what could be tastier than a piece of fondant cake? Fondant cakes have become all the rage in recent years, with the rise of cake decorating shows like Cake Boss, where bakers are tasked with making cakes that are part dessert and part piece of art. Fondant is a type of icing that generally comes in two forms. The first form is rolled, and this form has a clay-like texture. The other type is a poured fondant, and it's a thick liquid. Rolled fondant is far more common and is the preferred fondant for cake decorating since it can be formed and manipulated into basically any shape needed. Rolled fondant is typically made from sugar, water, and corn syrup, and if it's going to be primarily used for shaping, then gelatin or glycerin is added. Fondant is rolled out into sheets and then draped over the cake. It's also shaped and sculpted, sort of like Play-Doh. Because fondant is heavier than regular spreadable icing, a thicker, denser cake is needed to withstand the weight of the fondant. Therefore, these cakes are usually very rich, decadent, and dense. Fondant cakes are common for big celebrations like weddings or milestone birthdays, where they're custom made to suit a specific theme. And of course, fondant cakes are usually a lot more expensive than regular sponge cakes. Since everything about the cake costs more: the fondant, the time to prepare the cake, and the cake batter itself. But fondant is so versatile, it can come in any color and be shaped to make pretty much anything. So unlike regular cakes, cakes that utilize fondant can run the gamut on creativity. And while the fondant itself is very sweet and the cake underneath is very decadent, fondant cakes are made all the more tasty by their sweet appearance. Not just pleasing to the palate, but also pleasing to the eye, fondant cakes are clearly some of the most elaborate and tasty desserts around. Number 1. Frozen hot chocolate. I would be amiss if I didn't include ice cream sundaes on a list of the top 15 most tasty desserts. But in lieu of a DQ hot fudge sundae or a classic strawberry sundae, why not include the most expensive sundae on the planet? The frozen hot chocolate dessert is not only the most expensive sundae in the world, it also holds the Guinness World Record for the most expensive dessert. Now, there are other desserts that have price tags that exceed this frozen hot chocolate, but those desserts are custom-made one-offs. The frozen hot chocolate was not. It was served at the Serendipity 3 restaurant in New York. The decadent dessert featured a frozen chocolate mix that boasted a blend of 28 cocos, 14 of which are the most expensive in the world. The dessert also featured shavings from the most expensive truffle in the world, the La Madeleine au truffle, which cost around $2,500 per pound, and the dessert was topped off with 5 grams of 24-karat edible gold. The dessert was served in a Harcourt crystal goblet with a jewel-encrusted spoon, and a gold and white diamond necklace adorned the goblet. The spoon and the necklace were take-homes. Clearly, this was not a typical sundae. Everything about the hot frozen chocolate says opulence and indulgence. So how much did this chocolate dream set you back? Well, $25,000. And the proceeds were donated to a children's charity, so it was a dessert with a social conscience. When it comes to chocolate, decadent and overall tastiness, it would be hard to rival what was surely one of the most delicious desserts on the planet, which is why the frozen hot chocolate has earned the top spot on this list of 15 tasty desserts. I'll see you next time. I'm gonna go eat.
Watch our binge-watching playlist if you'd like to watch all of our most popular top 15 videos. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and get ready to binge.
Thank you to our channel members.